Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to be using a Hero Arts cover plate, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. It's a beautiful Happy Holidays cover plate. Also going to be using some beautiful Distress Oxide spray and a mica spray. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's start by creating a background. We're going to be using one of these Distress Mica stains. These are from Tim Holtz and it's from the Holiday 2022 collection. And this little pack contains 3 of the mica stains: Fresh Balsam, Tart Cranberry, and Winter Frost. And we're going to be using that Winter Frost today. We're also going to make sure we shake up these really well. You want to make sure that there's no mica at the bottom when you're done shaking. It can clog up the sprayer. So you do want to make sure you shake that really well. And then we're going to combine this with the Uncharted Mariner, and this is the Distress Oxide spray. So to get started, I've got my Distress sprayer, which just has water in it. I've got a piece of Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. This is a 100-pound weight. And I'm going to start off with my Distress sprayer, and I'm spritzing my glass medium mat with a little bit of water. And now I've got the Distress Oxide spray, and again, this is the Uncharted Mariner. I'm going to just drop that paper right into that ink, and I'm just going to press my paper down and pick up that ink. And I'm just going for a really random look, and I do want some light and dark areas. Now what I'm going to do is heat set this in between. I want to build up some layers of color. So if I just add a little heat and dry that off, I can then come in and just keep adding the layers. So now I'm going to add some more ink, a little bit more of that water, and the water is just to help me move it around a little bit. It just allows me to move that ink around. Now you could use your ink pad here. You could use your Distress Oxide ink pad and just put some of that onto your glass medium mat and then spritz that with water. I find it a little easier with the sprayer because I can get a wider area and I get a little bit more variety in the spraying. But that's up to you. Whatever you have, just you can make that work. If all you have is the Distress Oxide ink pad, you can make that work as well. So here I'm just again layering this up and heat setting in between, and you can see I'm really starting to build up some beautiful layers of color. And I am going for those light and dark areas because this is going to be sitting in the background of our shaker card. So I do want a nice variety. As you look through the shaker area, you'll see this beautiful background. So now I'm just going to try to straighten out that paper a little bit, but we'll put some weight on this later and let this sit. But for now, again, I'm using up some of that leftover ink on my glass medium mat. Now I can go ahead and just clean this up. I like the way this looks so far. I'll heat set that again. And now we're going to add some of that mica stain. So again, I'm going to be using that Winter Frost color. And these stains, once you spray them, they have this beautiful shimmer. Let me shake this up really well. And then we will go ahead and spritz that onto our cardstock. And I've got my hand pretty far back from this. I want to get some nice spatters of color. Again, I'll heat set that. And where these larger droplets are, you'll see some really beautiful mica, but you'll also see those little tiny bits of it there in some of the smaller sprays. So this is just gorgeous, and these two colors together are just so pretty. You do want to make sure you take a damp paper towel when you're done and wipe off those nozzles before you put everything away. You don't want it to be clogged up when you pick it up later on. So now I've got some white gesso. I'm putting a little bit onto my glass medium mat. I'll spritz that with a little bit of water and we'll spatter this panel. And this will give us the look of snow. I am just going to apply some of that white ink onto an acrylic block, and I'm just going to push that ink down onto the paper. I wanted a lot of spattering, so that's why I'm using this technique. I want to get as much of that white down as I can, but I don't want my droplets to be too big. So by spattering it right off the acrylic block, I'm going to get a nice coverage. So again, that'll give us that pretty snowy background. Once that's all set, I'm going to set that aside to dry. So I've got some Hero Arts glitter paper. This pack contains black and white glitter paper. I'm going to grab that white one, and then we're going to use this beautiful die. This is from the Hero Arts Fancy Dies, and this one is called the Happy Holidays Cover Plate. So it will not cut the edges of the die. So what we're going to do is cut our paper down to size, and I'm going for 5.5 by 4.25. So a standard A2 size panel. And then I'm going to line up that die right in the center. And again, it won't cut the outer edges. It's just going to die cut the words out of this panel. So I'll tape that down with some purple tape once I know that it's centered and nice and straight, and I can run that through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. I did run it through a couple of times just to make sure that I cut through that glitter paper, because it is a little bit more textural, so I like to run it through a few times. Now I'll just pop out all those little letters, and I will save those letters. They can be used for another project, so I'm going to set those aside. I usually just keep them with the die. I add a little sleeve, and I put them in the sleeve with my die so that I can keep them all together. So now you can see how that beautiful background is going to show through. So now I've got another piece of white cardstock. It's the same exact size that we cut before, the 4.25 by 5.5 inches, and I'll do the same thing with this background panel. I'm going to place this background panel on a piece of white cardstock. And again, it's that 100-pound weight. The paper curled a little bit, and it does curl a bit when you do your background sprays. So what I like to do is just layer that up with another piece of cardstock, and that just flattens things out a little bit. And then you can also just put something heavy on that for a little while and let that sit. So there you see, I just grabbed a couple of my MISTI stamp positioners just for weight, and I put those right on top. I've got some clear acetate. This is from Fawn, and I've cut that panel same size, 4.25 by 5.5, and I'm going to glue that to this cover plate background. And what I'm going to do is make sure I have enough glue tucked in and around all these little letters. You want to be careful not to get too much glue here. You don't want it to get onto your acetate. But if you do accidentally get a little bit on your acetate, I just take a little water on a paper towel and just kind of rub that off. You just don't want to scratch that plastic. So there again, I've got my couple of MISTIs for some weight, and I like to use my Nuvo Surface Sweep brush. It's a super soft brush, so any soft brush you have is really great to just sweep off that acetate. Any kind of bits of lint or glitter that might get stuck there, so you can easily remove that. So now I've got some 3D foam tape. I'm doubling this up, so I'm just going to fold it back on itself. I need a little bit of height here because we are creating a shaker card, and I want plenty of room for my little elements to be able to shake around inside this panel. I'm going to cut this into some narrow strips just so that I can get right around these edges. So I cut it down to maybe about 1/8 of an inch wide. And then what you want to make sure you do here is butt those pieces of tape right up against each other. You don't want any gaps there, because if you have any gaps, those little shaker elements are going to slide out. And we are using some clear glitter, so you do want a nice tight adhesion between these pieces of tape. So I'm going to take some time and make sure I line those all up all the way around. Now I've got some rock candy glitter from Tim Holtz. That's that beautiful clear glitter. And then I've got my Pink and Main anti-static powder tool, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that anti-static powder. I just don't want that glitter to stick to that acetate too much. Now I had a little bit more powder than I needed, so I'm going back to that little brush and brushing away that excess. Now I'm just going to add some of this glitter, and you can add as much or as little here as you want, but this panel is quite large, so I'm adding enough. Now I will tell you at this point, I changed my mind later on and decided it needed more elements inside my shaker card. So I'll show you a bit later what I added to this just for a little bit more interest. But at this point, I thought that's the way I wanted it, so I went ahead and added this back panel. And I'm just going to make sure when you add this, you want to make sure you press those edges really well so that none of those little shaker bits escape. So now we've got that glitter in there, and again, I will add a bit more to that later. Now I'm going to grab this beautiful little holly berry and leaves. This is from the Hero Art set, and you can see those beautiful images that you get. And this one is called Holly Berries. So I've placed it on in my mini MISTI. I'm using my Versamark Watermark Ink Pad. And again, this is the Strathmore Bristol Smooth Cardstock. I'm inking that up. I'll press that out with my Stampendable stamp press. I am going to ink that a couple of times. When I'm using embossing ink, I like to do a couple of coats, light coats. You don't want to push that thick ink down into your stamp too much. It's better if you do a couple layers of stamping. So now I've got my Ranger Detail White Embossing Powder. I'm going to sprinkle that on. I'm tapping away any excess there. And then I'll go ahead and heat set that. I want to make sure that my heat tool is very hot before I go to my cardstock. And then I can go ahead and heat set that. And you'll know that it's embossed when it gets that glossy finish on it. You see any kind of matte areas or darker areas, just go back over that real quickly. I've got Aquamarine Blue and Smoky Teal, and this is all the color I'm going to be adding to this stamp. I'm using my Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens. These are water-based pens, and I'm using the blender to do my blending. Now using water here would be really pretty as well. And what's nice is that embossing is going to keep the ink right inside the lines, so it's really easy to do your coloring. And if you do get any ink up on top of that embossing, you can just blot that off with a paper towel. It is a water-based ink, so it'll come right off. So I'm adding a little shadowing with these two colors, just adding a little shadowing down the center, and then kind of pulling that color out towards the edges. And I know it's hard for you to see where I'm coloring, but I'm just following the lines, those embossed lines there. And the look I was going for was just to have the blues and white colors. I didn't want to add any additional colors. But you could always add a pop of red or pink to this card if you wanted to. So there's a closer look. Now I'm going to use my detail scissors to cut this out. I am going to try to get up close to those embossed lines. Now if you accidentally cut into that line, it's no problem. Just quickly heat set it. It'll melt that powder again and attach it right back to your card. So here's where I wanted to show you that I did open that back up and I popped in a few more sequins. And these are from the Picket Fence Studio Sequin Mix. This is called Icicles. And this is a really pretty mix. It's got some snowflakes, and then we're going to grab these little kind of aqua blue sequins. I'm going to place those right over the berries on this stamp. So I'm using the Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to attach those. And I've got my Marvy jewel picker. That'll just help me to easily pick these up and pop these into place. So I'm just pressing those down to make sure they're on there nice and secure. That's going to sit right there on our card. So let's go ahead and attach this to the front of our card. And I'm again going back to that Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. And it'll fit exactly. It's the exact same size as my A2 standard size card. Again, I'm just going to place those MISTIs on there and let that dry. I'm popping up the holly and berries with a little bit of foam tape. And then I'm going to put that right over that, right kind of towards the right bottom of that O. And then here's where I am going to grab those enamel dots. These are from Ranger. And I'm just going to pop a little bit of that white in the center of each of these sequins. So just a quick reminder that all the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below and also on my blog. Let's take a closer look at the card. And I just love that little holly and berry leaves on the front. And don't forget, all those letters that we popped out of there can be used for a second card. So you could really get 2 cards out of this one die. And then there, I wanted to show you that background again and that pretty mica. It's a little bit hard to see when you're looking through the window plastic on camera, but in person it's absolutely gorgeous. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Happy holidays. Take care. Bye-bye.